Hello and welcome everybody to today's online lecture preview on evolutionary psychology with Dr. Reed, hosted by the Columbia University Summer Session. My name is Megan O'Donovan. I am an academic affairs specialist working with our continuing education programs at Columbia University's School of Professional Studies. Before we begin, I do have a few housekeeping announcements. For those of you who are just joining us now, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. As the webinar progresses, we will be turning off the chat function, so please feel free to submit any of your questions and comments to the Q&A box that's located at the bottom of your Zoom window. While we may answer some questions digitally, we will probably hold off on most for a live Q&A near the end. For any admissions related questions, we do ask that you hold those until we have reached that part of today's webinar where we will likely cover most of the questions you may have. I would also like to let everyone know that we are recording today's presentation and you will be receiving an email with a link to that recording so you can go back and review all the information that's being discussed today. With that said, I would like to introduce you to Jessica Yang, the Director of the Columbia Summer Sessions.
Thanks so much, Megan. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. First, I'd like to introduce to you some of our colleagues. With us today is Assistant Director of Academic Affairs, Clara Fong, Assistant Director of Recruitment, Alex Baroka, and a big thank you to Angie Freer from the events team in the background helping with this presentation. We all work closely together to administer a robust summer term in programming here at Columbia, where we offer over 300 courses across 50 different subject areas. The majority of our summer students are our very own Columbia undergraduates, but we're also pleased to offer these courses to visiting students like you. Prospective students have the opportunity to select from our catalog of courses ranging from the arts and humanities, social justice, pre-med studies, and the sciences. Today, we're pleased to be hosting our fourth webinar in a multi-part lecture series where we invite students to experience Columbia by previewing courses with our faculty. We're honored to have Dr. Lawrence Ian Reed join us to discuss the psychology course, Evolutionary Psychology, and allow you to experience what it's like to be a student inside our classrooms. Dr. Ian Reed is a lecturer in the Department of Psychology at Columbia University and a clinical assistant professor of psychology at New York University. He completed his clinical internship at McLean Hospital, Harvard Medical School in 2010, and he is interested in basic and applied research related to facial expression, emotion, and cooperation. His current research examines the communicative and commitment functions of facial expressions. Dr. Reed has clinical experience treating clients across many diagnostic categories, age ranges, and ethnicities. In addition, he has a specialization in treating adolescents and adults with mood disorders, such as depression and anxiety, and emotional disorders. Many of his treatment methods are drawn from cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy. This summer, Dr. Reed is teaching two courses with us at Columbia Summer Session, Evolutionary Psychology and Introduction to Statistical Behavioral Science. Once again, please join me in welcoming Dr. Reed, and I'll hand it over to him.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, it's really my pleasure to talk to you about this evolutionary psychology class that I'm going to be teaching in the summer. And it's a class that I've started teaching, I think, in 2006, and it's evolved over time to be what it is today and what I teach over at Columbia. If you could go to the next slide, while I get started. So I want to start from the beginning when I describe evolutionary psychology. And when I say the beginning, I mean the very beginning. So 10 to 15 billion years ago, the universe was created. And at that time, there was only physics. And then physics created chemistry, chemistry created biology, and biology created psychology. But what that means is that in order to understand chemistry, you need to know a little bit about biology. And in order to understand biology, you need to know, in order to understand psychology, you need to know a little bit about biology. And that's where we're going to start off today. So about 5 billion years ago, the Earth was created. And in the beginning, there was just simplicity. Now, it's difficult to describe how even a simple universe began. But the universe was originally populated with stable things. And by stable, I mean something that's common enough or long-lasting enough to have a name, something like a rock or a galaxy or an ocean wave. So what happens is that things tend to go into their stable configuration and then stay there. So soap bubbles are stable configurations of thin films of liquid with a gaseous center. And salt crystals have a crystal shape because that's a stable way of packing sodium and chloride ions together. And in the sun, the simplest atoms of all, hydrogen atoms, are constantly being turned into helium atoms because that's what's stable in that environment. So before the coming of life on Earth, there had to be some rudimentary evolutionary process of molecules that occurred just in terms of going from their unstable to stable forms. So the idea is that once something gets into its stable configuration, it'll tend to stay there. Now, there's no mystery about this. This had to happen by definition. Now, the problem is you can't just take a bunch of stable atoms and then put them in a salt and pepper shaker and then out comes Adam or Eve or any other living organism. And this is where the theory of evolution by natural selection comes in. So we don't know what chemicals were abundant on Earth before life, but we can be reasonably sure that they included water, carbon dioxide, methane, and ammonia, because these are simple compounds that are present in other planets within our solar system. So what chemists have been able to do is that they put these simple compounds in beakers and flasks, and they apply heat analogous to the sun's rays and electricity analogous to thunder and lightning. And what happens is that after a couple of weeks, they get this disgusting looking brownish goopy soup that has in it molecules that are more complicated than the original ones put in there. So some scientists have been able to create amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. Others have been able to create purines and pyrimidines, which are the building blocks of DNA itself. Now, at some point, about 3 billion years ago, a specific molecule was created. And it wasn't the biggest or baddest or most complicated molecule, but it had an amazing ability to just make a perfect copy of itself. And we'll call this the replicator. Now, I lose a lot of people at this part of the story because it seems sort of like an unlikely accident, but that's for a specific reason. As humans, we live 80, 90 years. So anything that can't happen within that time frame, we can consider as impossible. So it's like winning the lottery. If you played the lottery every day, you'd probably never win. But if you played the lottery every day for 3 billion years, you'd probably win several times. And this accident, this fortunate accident, only had to happen once. So what happened was that you had this replicator that quickly spread itself throughout the goops and soups of the seas, using whatever resources it needed, space, food, to continue replicating itself. So at this point, it seems that we have a population of the same replicators all throughout the goops and soups of the seas. But an important part of any replication process is going to be mistakes, copying errors. And it's these occasional copying errors that make evolution by natural selection possible. So what you had was not a population of the same replicator, but a population of different replicators that had all descended from the same replicator. Now, these mistakes were oftentimes bad, and they resulted in the death, I mean that figuratively, of the replicator. But once every 100,000 or so mistakes, there was a good mistake that happened. And this mistake had one of a couple different consequences. So these good mistakes increased the longevity of the replicator, so how long it lived, the fecundity of the replicator, so the rate in which it multiplies, and the copy fidelity of the replicator, so the accuracy through which that replicator makes its copies. So with this, there was a competition amongst these replicators, even though they weren't aware of it, simply because there's a finite amount of resources on the in the world, and the goops and soups of the seas. So what happened is that these copying errors were cumulative and progressive. You can sort of think of them like the telephone game, where every message is intelligible on the way, but the last message is completely different than the first one. So what probably happened is that these replicators started finding, just by dumb luck, ways of increasing their stability. So perhaps one of these replicators stumbled upon the ability to secrete some type of enzyme where it could break down other replicators and use them as food. Maybe this was a prototypical carnivore. And then maybe in response, some other replicators defended themselves, from these carnivores, maybe by building protective walls around themselves. And maybe this is how the first cell walls were created. The idea is that this process of copying errors was non-random, and it resulted in more stable replicators existing over time. The copying errors were cumulative and progressive, and they went on for 3-4 billion years now. Now, the question is, where are these replicators now? Are they still around? Well, yeah, they are, but you won't find them floating naked in the goops and soups of the seas anymore. They've given up this cavalier freedom long, long ago. Now they live in huge lumbering robots, and they only interact with the world through tortuously indirect ways. Today, they go by the name of genes, and we are their survival machines, and we are the ultimate rationale for their existence. Next slide, please. It's easy to see something like this happen in an organism with a small generation time, short generation time, like E. coli. So if I had some E. coli in my hand, it's what, like 12:15 now in the afternoon, it would look like a mound of salt, okay? And if I was to get an eyedropper and put an antibiotic on that E. coli, it would shrivel down such that by 12:45, you'd see nothing in my hand. But by about 5 p.m. or so, you'd start to see that salt mound growing again. But this salt mound would be those that by dumb luck had a resistance to that antibody in the first place. And those ones would create a new strain. This is kind of the quagmire that we've gotten ourselves into with COVID now, because it's mutating, creating different strains that are resistant to certain things. The thought experiment that I want to put you in is this idea of safe passage to the future. So suppose you decide, for whatever reason, that you wanted to experience life in the 25th century. And furthermore, suppose that the only way of keeping your body alive that long required it to be placed in some sort of hibernation device of sorts, maybe a cryogenetic chamber like Austin Powers or something. So you could arrange to climb into that chamber and its surrounding supporting castle, be put to sleep, and then automatically be awakened and released in the year 2401. Now, designing the capsule itself is not your only engineering problem. You can't count on your descendants to take care of it because they might not care. So you have two basic strategies. The first strategy is to prospect around an ideal location as best you can foresee for a fixed installation that will be well supplied with water, light, whatever you need to keep the capsule powered. We're going to call this the plant method. Now, the problem with the plant method is that the capsule can't be moved if someone decides to build a highway over it or something like that. Now, the second strategy is much more sophisticated and expensive, but it avoids this drawback. You could design a mobile facility to house your capsule along with the requisite sensors and early warning devices so that it can move out of harm's way and seek out new resources for energy and repair materials as it needs them. So in short, you could build a robot for you to be put in. Now, you should design this robot above all else to be interested in your survival. You're the main point of this robot. Now, I like this thought experiment because it puts you in the perspective of the genes. The main point of our existence is for the propagation of the genes, and that is borne out in all the behaviors that we have. So think about how you would design this robot, how you design for it to zig in certain situations and to zag in other situations. Well, would you program your robot to live and let live? What about, let's say, if water short-circuited the robot? How would you avoid water? Maybe you program it to be anxious or afraid or jittery, or find water disgusting to the taste or to the look. These are the kind of design problems that our genes needed to solve. And furthermore, they needed to solve them with the current environment, with the knowledge of the current environment, predicting the future environment, which is very, very difficult. Oftentimes, our genes have made mistakes because they weren't around now when they were being designed way, way back then. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so what is evolutionary psychology? Evolutionary psychology is the application of the principles of evolutionary biology to psychological theory and research. Now, the central assumption is that the human brain is comprised of a large number of specialized mechanisms that were shaped over time by evolution via natural selection. Now, we call these specialized mechanisms adaptations. The way that it works is sort of like your phone. So if you're like me, you've got a phone that has plenty of apps. One of them is good for making video calls, but it really stinks at buying things from Amazon. One of them is really good for buying things at Amazon, but it really stinks at finding directions to my favorite pizza place. And another one's good at finding directions to my favorite pizza place, but it really stinks at playing video games, and so on and so forth. Our minds and bodies are like this as well. So we've got a heart that's really good at pumping blood through our veins, but it really stinks at seeing. We've got eyes that are really good at seeing, but they really stink at hearing. We've got sweat glands that really stink. I've got pause for laughter written down. Anyway, but our minds are the same way. We've got a part of our minds that's really good at telling us whom to be attracted to, but it's not really good at telling us when to sleep. We've got a part of our mind that's really good at telling us when to sleep, but it's really, really bad at telling us when to be afraid and when to run, and so on and so forth. These are all adaptations sculpted by natural selection to increase our stability in comparison to other organisms. Next slide, please. Okay. Evolutionary psychology looks at behavior in a very different way from most traditional forms of psychology. So let's suppose we observe a bit of behavior. So you might know that there's some species of birds, bowerbirds, that build elaborate nests filled with blue ornaments. So any psychologist would ask, why did she do that? Now, some of these answers are wrong and can be disproved using the scientific method. But it's possible to have a correct answer for this question at multiple levels. Next slide. So there's this distinction between proximate questions and explanations and ultimate questions and explanations. Let's take the example of hunger. You're hungry and you ask a psychologist, why am I hungry? Traditional psychologists will say, well, you're hungry because your body is secreting some sort of hormone that's giving you the uncomfortable sensation that we cause hunger, that's secreted after a certain amount of time after having last eaten a meal. And psychologists make their living answering these proximate plumbing and wiring how questions. The evolutionary psychologist is not interested in those questions. The evolutionary psychologist is interested in what we call ultimate explanations. So we're interested in why you get hungry. So the reason why you get hungry is because those of our ancestors that didn't get hungry after not having eaten for a certain period of time had fewer offspring than those that did. Now, keep in mind that this answer, in my mind, is much more powerful because it tells us not only why we get hungry, but why hunger feels the way that it does. So, for example, why there aren't individuals who, when they haven't eaten, don't double over in pain and become immobile, or why there's some organisms who didn't develop a feeling of hunger that allowed them to easily ignore it. It describes why our hunger feels the way that it is, the way that it does, why it has the form that it does. And we can ask these same questions for many, 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 many different things. Next slide. Okay. So I kind of said this, sorry for the spoiler alert, but traditional psychologists focus on proximate explanations. They're interested in the plumbing and wiring mechanisms that underlie behavior. For an evolutionary psychologist, our goals are to explain why the behavior is patterned the way it is, why we respond to certain features in the environment, and why these responses take the form that they do. Next slide. Okay. Now, I care about the truth. I have the belief that the truth will set us free and that knowledge is always a good thing. Now, there's going to be some inconvenient truths that I'm going to talk about in this class, but hopefully that won't deter you from taking it. So I feel a little bit like Morpheus when I say that you can take my sex, evolution, and human behavior course and I'll show you how deep the rabbit hole goes, or you can take the blue pill and believe whatever you want to believe. Next slide. Here are just some of the questions that we're going to answer in my sex, evolution, and human behavior class. The first one is, why do we have sex? Now, what I should say is why we reproduce sexually rather than asexually. There are many organisms that reproduce asexually. That is, they're able to just make clones of themselves. And you might think, wow, that would be pretty efficient. You don't need to spend all this time looking for a mate. You know, think about all the time we spend on Tinder or Bumble or Hinge looking for a mate. You wouldn't need to do that. You just make a copy of yourself. The other thing is that if you make a copy of yourself, you don't need to, your offspring get 100% of your genes, not 50% of them. It seems to be very, very efficient. Why don't we reproduce asexually? It's not like we can't. Other organisms do. Why haven't we evolved to? Next question. Slide. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Now, how many of us have made awful decisions under the influence of love or what we thought love was? The behavior that we exhibit when we are in love doesn't seem to be in our own self-interest. It makes us slap people like Will Smith, allegedly. Next slide. Okay. The numbers are really, really tough to tie down, but I think between 20 and 70% of women cheat on their partners, and 30 to 80% of men cheat on their partners. Why? Why would we do that? What are the benefits of not being faithful to your spouse? It would seem to cause all sorts of problems. You got plenty of great things at home. As Paul Newman said, why go out for a hamburger when I have steak at home? Next slide. We die. Every living thing dies. Some trees can live 200 years. Some organisms only live a few minutes. Some, butterflies, live a few hours. Why do we die? More specifically, why do we age? It would seem that there'd be a huge evolutionary benefit in living longer. Why haven't we evolved to? Why 90, 80 years rather than 50 or 150? We'll answer this question. Next slide. We oftentimes do things that are quite literally poisonous to our bodies. We drink alcohol, we smoke marijuana, we use nicotine, and in fact, we feel good when we do these things. Why do we feel good when we do these things? Wouldn't you anticipate that something that is poisonous to us would feel bad? Why have we an evolved affinity for things that are likely to kill us? Next slide, please. Friendship. If you go to Burger King, they're going to give you exactly one bacon double cheeseburger, and you're going to give them exactly $3.89. Specific exchange there. But with your friends, it works a little bit differently. Like, it would be really weird if your friend invited you to dinner and then you whipped out your wallet and you're like, all right, how much is that going to be? That would strain the friendship, not cement it. Now, why is that? Why has friendship evolved? What problem has it evolved to solve? Next slide, please. War. What is it good for? Say it again. Why would someone be dumb enough to go and do an activity that has a high likelihood of getting themselves killed? Could this have been an evolved mechanism? Is it possible that those who go to war actually have more offspring than those that don't go to war? Next slide. Babies are cute. Why? There's nothing intrinsically cute about anything. We just evolved to find it cute. Babies are extremely cute. Good example. Why have we evolved to find them cute? Next slide. Again, there's nothing intrinsically beautiful, disgusting, calming, comforting about anything. Beauty is in the adaptations of the beholder. We've evolved to find this view beautiful. Why? Why haven't we evolved to find other views beautiful? We'll talk a lot about aesthetics. Next slide. This is a piece of poop. Now, again, there's nothing intrinsically disgusting or beautiful about a piece of poop. If I was a housefly, I would probably look at that poop and I would say, wow, this smells really good. This is a great place for me to build a home. This is a great place for me to hang out. Again, if there was something intrinsically disgusting about poop, then everything would see it disgusting. But we do for specific reasons. Flies don't for specific reasons. Next slide. This is Evangeline Lili circa, I don't know, 2018. Nothing intrinsically beautiful about her, but if you are a heterosexual male or a homosexual female, then there's just something about the woman in this image that does something to you. Why? Again, there's nothing intrinsically beautiful about her, but there's something about her that we find beautiful. What is that thing? Next slide. Ah, Jack, the man of science, my favorite character from Lost. Now, if you're a heterosexual woman or homosexual man, then you're probably thinking, wow, this is a really studly guy. Or even if you're a heterosexual man like me, you're thinking, wow, this is a really studly guy. But again, what is it about Jack that is studly? Again, nothing intrinsically studly about him. We just see him that way. Next slide. Okay, if you look at the picture on the right, you see another studly guy that has almost no body fat. A very attractive guy, sculpted out of clay. On the right, we have someone of the same species who has much more body fat, also extremely beautiful. Now, the question is this: why is there sexual dimorphism? Why have men and women evolved to have different body shapes? You might think, well, we have the same problems to solve. Why are we so different? Next slide. Oh, that's the last slide. Okay, so we'll talk about those topics and others. So just wanting to whet your appetite for the class. And I hope that you guys will sign up for it. And if you have any questions about it, just shoot me an email and I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for that preview, Dr. Reed. And before we move ahead with the Q&A portion, as just mentioned in the chat, please submit your questions at the bottom for Dr. Reed, and we will go over them. And in the meantime, we have both of his courses that he is leading this summer up here. This was a preview for Evolutionary Psychology, and he also has a course of Introduction to Statistics for Behavioral Science. And with that, we can get started with our first question. One of our attendees asked, first, I would like to ask you if at some point everyone will be from the same family, since everyone is reproducing over and over again in a sexual way rather than an asexual way.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
If eventually people would become all related or the same family, since we are all reproducing in a sexual way rather than asexual.
Well, first let me say that you can think of a species as just a really big family, or you could think of races as just smaller, really big families. So you and I are brothers and sisters. So to that extent, we are of a really big family. But there's not everyone is going to sleep with everyone else. So there's going to be some bifurcation, because there's going to be certain lineages that go in one way, and then certain lineages that are going in a different way. And that's because, and for many reasons, the most simple of them is because of geographic differences. That's how the races came, is that certain individuals moved out of certain ways and started sleeping with each other and not with another individual, or not with another group of individuals. And that's how species were created. People went out of Africa, out of Egypt, and stopped sleeping with each other. So that's how new families sort of start. You want to say it that way. But what I mean by new families, new species.
Let's see, and to move on to the second question from the same attendee is, to what extent is everything we do, to what extent is it driven by our genes and DNA? Would it be everything?
Okay, well, that's a difficult question. So, and there's multiple ways that I can answer that question. So, I can say that everything that we do ultimately is in the service of sex. That may sound simplistic, but just think about it. You share the Guinness Book World Record for longest lineage. Everyone in your family, aside from a couple stray aunts and uncles, has succeeded in reproducing. And every generation, you've gotten better and better and better at it. We have evolved to become the best sex machines that we can possibly be. Now, so has every other species. COVID is a good sex machine. Well, a sex machine. Asexual reproducing machine. Roaches are good sex machines. Common cold is a good asexual machine. So everything comes down to that. But if you look at some behavior like personality, the genetic studies suggest that personality has a heritability of 40, 50%. So that means that only half of that behavior is due to our genes. The rest is due to our environmental conditions.
Thank you. Moving on, a little different. This attendee is in the mental health counseling program, and they are wondering, how do you think evolutionary psychology could help their clients?
Well, an evolutionary approach can shed light on why someone might be dealing with what they're dealing with. Let me just give you just a quick example. So let's talk about depression. How about that? That sounds a good one. So from an evolutionary perspective, depression is pretty difficult to explain. So depression, it decreases our motivation, makes us tired all the time, makes us hopeless, makes us not want to do anything. It makes everything seem arduous. It makes everything seem like it's not worth the effort. So you might think, well, what good is it being depressed? But from an evolutionary perspective, there can be a lot of good in being depressed. Let's say that there's two versions of me. Okay, imagine that. And let's say that we're both in love with Rachel Brosnahan, okay, which may or may not be true. And let's say one of us is prone to depression and the other one is not prone to depression. Well, the one of us that's not prone to depression, he's gonna, write Rachel all this fan mail, and whenever she posts something on Instagram, head over to Central Park, figure out where they're filming Mrs. Maisel, and try to meet her, even though she's married and everything. And he doesn't have a chance. But let's say that there's another version that's prone to depression. This person is going to lose hope after a while. He's going to say, maybe this goal is futile. And he's going to stop achieving that goal, stop trying to achieve that goal. From an evolutionary perspective, depression is nature's way of telling us, you're barking up the wrong tree. You're going to waste a lot of effort if you continue with this goal. Now, this can be really helpful in terms of helping people. When in my clinical training, someone once told me, and I think this is a bit greedy, but I think there's some truth to it, that depression is the lack of positive reinforcement. It's when we feel depressed when we put forth a lot of effort or time in something and it's not come to fruition. It's not borne fruit. And the response is, one, to stop expelling that effort because it's not going to pay off. Oftentimes, people that come to therapy depressed have something like this. They devoted a lot of time to a relationship or some goal. So the best thing to do from a clinical perspective, if you understand that, is to allow them to refocus their efforts on other goals so that they can learn that, look, their hard work is going to pay off. So that's just one example of how we can use an evolutionary perspective to shed light on and to better help the people coming in to treatment. Another example is seasonal affective disorder. well, what's now called depression with a seasonal specifier as of DSM-5. But if you understand, wait a minute, during the winter months, moving around is more metabolically expensive, that it makes sense to conserve energy during the winter months, then that'll help you predict the course of someone's depression, and it'll help you know what the treatment is, some light therapy perhaps. An understanding of why is almost always helpful.
Thank you. Another attendee asked, how do you see the intersection of psychology and business?
Never thought of that. I don't know. Can I pass?
That's okay. Yes. I guess maybe to go back a little bit to the question you did just answer, since we cannot change evolutionary psychology on a personal level, do you think this just seems frustrating to some people?
What do you mean we can't change evolution on a personal level?
I'm unsure. That is.
Well, okay, so if I could just say,
Yes.
there are some evolved traits that are resistant to environmental influence, like how many toes you have and fingers you have, and like what color your eyes are. But there's some evolutionary traits that want environmental influence, like our skin color. We suntan, or our personality, or certain behaviors. So there's this fallacy called the genetic fallacy that is the belief that all genetic traits are immutable.
I think that does answer, because they were looking at it, about the human race and how we cannot always change the evolution, but I think that gave us a good answer. Another question we have is, what effect has the pandemic had on the field of psychology?
Well, it's certainly spurred a lot of research, on the effects of groups and the interchange of ideas and beliefs. But I typically think of the other virus as more of a biological, physiological, medical thing than a psychological thing.
And to follow up with that, how much has the psychology field changed within the last few years, even in relation to the pandemic?
In the past few years, I don't know that it's changed very much. The biggest changes probably are in increasing, or I should say improving, the research practices. And this was, I think the past decade, there's been this sort of reckoning, specifically in social psychology, in terms of a lot of findings not being able to be replicated. So psychology has changed a lot in terms of increasing the rigor of the science. That's probably the biggest change that there has been. And
then one of our final questions, if you don't mind, could you walk us through maybe your professional journey, where you got to today, and maybe what drew your interest to evolutionary psychology?
Sure. So I knew I wanted to be a psychologist pretty young in high school, and I was lucky that I happened to be right. So I went into college knowing exactly what I wanted to do. So I took all the classes, got all the experience that I needed, and was on my path towards helping people, because I really liked the idea of helping people. I didn't know what type of research that I wanted to do. I'd done some research on depression, some developmental stuff, but nothing that really moved me. And then I was dating a girl, and we were dating for maybe like 6 months, but she was cheating on me for like 4 of them, I think. And I found her roommate told me, and I remember thinking, wow, I wonder how many times she lied to me. Like she said, I'm on the phone with my grandmother, or like I'm visiting my brother for the weekend. And I thought there must have been so many times, and I fell for all of them. So I went to the library, like any, I guess, like a nerdy guy would do. I went to the library and I did a literature search on interpersonal deception. And I found that the people that were doing work on deception were interested in facial expression, particularly from an evolutionary perspective. And I didn't know people studied facial expression. I didn't know that was a thing. But I'll never forget that day, because that's the day that I was like, wow, this is awesome. And that was 24 years ago. I'm getting old. And I'm just as interested in facial expression and emotion from an evolutionary perspective now as I was then. Now, I'll never give her the satisfaction of knowing she created my profession as it is now. So don't tell her.
No problem. We'll keep that secret for you. So I don't think we have any other questions right now. So I do want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to meet with us, give us a preview of what students can expect this summer. So yeah, if you have any final words, we can hop on.
Yeah, just encourage you guys to just shoot me an email if you have any questions, or if you're interested, or I'm happy to send you the syllabus from last time, whatever you might need. But thanks a lot for paying attention and taking the time. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you. All right, and at this moment, if you have any other additional questions, we can send that over to Dr. Reed for you, but we will be moving on now to our admissions portions. So again, thank you, Dr. Reed. And now I will pass along to my colleague, Clara Fong, the Assistant Director of Academic Affairs.
Great, thank you, Megan. And hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you again, Dr. Reed, for that presentation. My name is Clara Fong, and I'm the Assistant Director of Academic Affairs here at SPS. And over the next few slides, I will briefly discuss the summer programs. Here you can find our summer session calendar for summer 2022. As you can see, there will be 3 main sessions. So Summer X, the full summer term, will run from May 23rd to August 12th. Summer A will run from May 23rd to July 1st. And Summer B will run from July 5th to August 12th. Visiting students can choose to attend one session in either block or join us for the whole summer. The application will remain the same for any session that you choose. The courses are posted on our summer website and on the directory of classes, and they all will note the session in which the course is being offered. So for those of you who are interested in enrolling in Dr. Reed's course or similar classes this summer, we will briefly highlight some of our available program and study options. As a summer visiting student, you'll fall under a specific population that covers where you are as a student, and you'll apply to the program that fits your needs. So you may be joining us as a visiting undergraduate or visiting graduate student, and that's for those who are currently working towards their bachelor's or master's degree and are attending university elsewhere. Post-baccalaureate studies are for those who have completed their degree already and want to come back and study a new subject area. So you can also take advantage of working with our fantastic advising team to build a summer curriculum with targeted coursework to either prepare you for a graduate program or take courses for professional development. Our Arts in the Summer program is open to all applicants. It's a shorter application process, and it's intended for those who only want to study in the arts, such as theater, film, and writing courses. And then finally, we have our 3 summer-only certifications of professional achievement, or CPAs, for upper-level undergraduate, graduate, and post-baccalaureate individuals who are looking to focus on a specific area of study during the summer. And so regarding those 3 summer CPAs, the Critical Issues in International Relations and the United Nations Studies CPAs are offered through a partnership with the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia, or SIPA. The Human Rights Program is offered through a partnership with the Institute for the Study of Human Rights. And all 3 summer CPAs have faculty teaching these courses who have experience as practitioners, whether they have experience at the UN or other governmental agencies. They consist of 4 courses each, and they can be completed in one full summer term or split over 2 summers. As you can see here, there is an abundance of subject areas to explore during the summer term. And just please note that registration for summer courses began on March 1st, and admitted students are currently enrolling into courses. So just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about which courses you're interested in this summer. We do have waitlists for courses that are full. So here you can see, in addition to Professor Reed's course, here's a sample list of psychology-focused courses running this summer. So just take a look, and you may be interested in checking out, again, our summer website or the directory of classes to learn more about each of these classes. And now that I've discussed the program in a little more depth, I will pass it over to my colleague Alex to discuss the admissions process.
Great, thank you, Clara. And it's a pleasure to be here today. So our application is available online at summer.sps.columbia.edu. And the application comes with an $80 application fee. However, we do have an application fee waiver code for individuals who attend this webinar, which you can see on the screen. It's SUMMSPS. And so be sure to take note of that application fee waiver code. This is applicable to applications to the Columbia summer session only, so please keep that in mind. With the exception of our Arts in the Summer application, all other programs require the following as a minimum. You may note that a personal statement of academic purpose is not mentioned here. An SOP is required for some programs like our summer certs, our summer certificates, but not for others. So be sure to check the requirements for your specific program of interest. Applicants with domestic coursework for the summer 2022 session must provide unofficial academic transcripts to our admissions team to begin the review process. Official transcripts can be submitted electronically after admissions. Applicants with international coursework applying to the programs listed here must provide official academic transcripts to our admissions team to begin the review process. Applicants must provide official transcripts that include an official English translation if the institution or institutions attended do not issue transcripts in English. Official transcripts must be sent electronically directly from the institution to our admission team at transcripts@sps.columbia.edu. Applicants with international coursework applying to the programs listed here must provide a WES course-by-course evaluation to our admissions team to begin the review process. To be considered for admission, students must be comfortable with rapid and idiomatic spoken English. Students whose native language is not English must include proof of English proficiency. So SPS accepts the following exams, requiring a minimum of 100 on the TOEFL and 7.0 on the IELTS to be considered for admission. Undergrad visiting applicants can also submit Duolingo scores in lieu of the TOEFL or IELTS. If the language of instruction of your undergrad degree conferring institution is English, and you completed 2 or more years at the institution, you don't need to take further steps to prove your fluency. However, if your undergrad education is not or was not conducted in English, or you completed fewer than 2 years at your degree conferring institution where English was the language of instruction, then you must provide official scores for the TOEFL or IELTS. All right, here are the upcoming deadlines for summer 2022. So I know we're past this date, but just so you know, priority course registration is given to students who apply by February 1st, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so the end of February 1st. For those of you who are unable to make the February 1st application deadline, we do have subsequent deadlines in March and April, which can be found on our website. Once your application is complete, it can take up to 2 to 3 weeks to receive a decision. Students will receive a decision notification via email and must log into their application portal to view their decision. You must submit an enrollment form available on your application dashboard and reply yes to confirm enrollment. All students applying to one of our summer certificates must place an enrollment deposit before registration information is emailed. Next steps, detailing registration will be emailed to all committed students beginning in late January. If you would like to speak with an admissions counselor after the session, you can begin by reaching out to us via email. We also offer one-on-one appointments, and links to these appointments can be found across the various program pages. If you're not sure where to start, reach out to us and let us know what you're interested in doing, and we can take it from there. If this is the final step in your research process and you feel confident to apply, visit our website and click Apply Now. Great, so we will now move on to the live Q&A portion of our presentation. So I encourage you to take advantage of this time to ask the program team any questions that you may have and that may have not been answered up until this point in the presentation. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Alex and Clara, for that presentation. We do have a couple questions coming in that I can go over. First one somebody asked is when the deadline for the full term is, and I can go back a couple slides so you guys can just see. So the session A and actual session X, that's our full term, that deadline will be on April 11th. If you are an international applicant, we did already pass that deadline, but you can still apply for session B. That deadline will be May 2nd. And we do encourage any international applicants to begin getting their documents in now, as they can sometimes take a little bit. Another attendee asked if the summer session is online or on campus. At this time, we are planning for a fully in-person on-campus summer, as we have in the past. So fingers crossed that it can remain the same. I recently applied for an online summer program at Columbia and was wondering if it is more challenging for us international students to enter the program. Well, if it is part of our summer session, it would be in person, and as long as you meet the requirements for the language testing, I believe you will be able to successfully complete our summer sessions programs. If you do have any further questions, though, I highly suggest reaching out to our admissions team, who will be able to further direct you and answer your question. Okay. I want to give everybody a moment to answer any, send any other questions they may need to ask. And just a reminder again, our session A final deadline is coming up in about 6 days. So if you would like to register for those courses, please get your applications in now.
Again, I know we had a lot of international students in this group, so I am just going to stick in the chat for everyone. We do have a link to a page on our website specifically for international students. So if you want to review any of the criteria or deadlines, you should be able to find it here in this link.
Thank you for sharing that, Jess. Let's see. The attendee that just sent in a question that you're international did not ask about your English language requirements, I would suggest reaching out to our admissions team directly so they could just further help you with your specific needs. And you can reach out to the email that's on the screen, summersessions@columbia.edu. Okay, and just while we give everyone just another couple moments to submit any questions they may have, I would like to let you all know that while this is the end of our lecture preview series, we do have a number of upcoming information sessions, both in our general summer sessions and some of our certificate programs, and you can find that all on our website. Actually, and I can go back again and just show you where to find it on our website here. If you click next to the apply button events, you will see a whole list of all of our upcoming information sessions that are a bit more in depth to the programs that we offer. Okay, and with that, I think I might give everybody about 4 minutes back to their day. It seems like we don't have any more questions right now. I do want to thank everybody again for joining us today. And I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, night, wherever you are. All right. Thank you very much.